Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the next live WTM event. Again, I'm always really excited to be part of these and that we can come together and talk about the freedom from the human condition in ourselves and in our entire species. And with understanding the human condition, we can finally fix up this world properly. We can solve all the problems on the planet at their source, and that is an incredibly exciting thing. In fact, once you understand the human condition, the more you can see just by being a single, very small, even infinitesimal part of life on Earth is a joy beyond comparison. Just fitting into a place on Earth where we as humans finally fit, where we haven't fit before. We haven't understood our purpose, what we're doing here, why we're here, and who we are. And with understanding the human condition, we can finally do that. And in fact, it's the responsibility really now of every single human on Earth to understand Jeremy Griffith's biological explanation of the human condition and use it to free yourself and help free the world from the most, in truth, horrific set of circumstances that's ever been known in any universe known ever. The human condition has been a terrible, terrible situation on Earth, and we've finally got a solution for it. So, the human condition is, simply or even superficially, why, when all the ideals in life are to be loving, cooperative, and selfless, are we humans the exact opposite? Why are we, in fact, angry, egocentric, and alienated, and aggressive, and selfish? Why? That's the core question in the whole of life, and but the human condition is more than that. It's and this is a key thing. It's that the human condition is actually a deep, dark, off limits, terrifying, psychological depression, shame, fear of where that question of why we are the way we are takes us inside of ourselves. Are we good or are we blights on the planet? And when you think about that truthfully, when you really consider that question, that's when you get to the human condition. And that is a truly terrifying proposition. Are you, to be or not to be, like Shakespeare said? Should I kill myself or not? It's a suicidal depression, and that's what the human condition is. So that's what's inside of all humans, and we can solve that now. And that's the thing, the human condition has always been so off limits. It's about us. We are the problem. We're the destructive ones. It's been incredibly difficult, to talk about it, but nevertheless, the situation on Earth is incredibly serious now. We humans can't cope with any more psychological trauma in our lives. Our psychosis, our personal and collective psychosis, is the human race is disintegrating from it. You can't put 8 billion people in a confined space and expect psychotic people in a confined space and think that there's going to be any other outcome. But there is. And that's what's being presented by Jeremy Griffith and on humancondition.com. There is. So the real problem isn't climate change or racism or famine or inequality. They're all symptoms of the human condition. The real problem is a core misreading, a psychosis that each of us carry deep inside of us every single day, and we push out onto the rest of the world. And 99.9% of the time, we don't know we're doing it. The best quote to get to the bottom of what humans are really like is from I just love the Scottish psychiatrist R.D. Laing, because he's so honest, and honesty is so devoid in humans at the moment, but this bloke was absolutely drop dead honest. And this is what he said about humans. He said, "We are dead but think we are alive. We're asleep but think we're awake. We are dreaming but take our dreams to be reality. We are the halt, lame, blind, deaf, the sick. We are doubly unconscious. We are so ill that we no longer feel ill, as in many terminal illnesses. We are mad but have no insight into the fact of our madness." And in another quote he said, "Our alienation goes to the roots. The realisation of this is the essential springboard for any serious reflection on any aspect of present interhuman life." And it's just so true. You cannot, there is no aspect of human life that you can go anywhere near dealing with or talking about or solving or understanding without dealing with the human condition. And that's what Jeremy Griffith has done. He's given us a safe path with all of our mess. We are in a bad state, humans, and that's a core truth that nobody could disagree with. But there's a path out, and not only a path out, but it's a glorious path, and it redeems humans 100%. And it's not even a good path. It's a magical path. It's the most exciting and incredible path out of that horror situation that R.D. Laing has described so magnificently. So anyway, but I just wanted to also read it, just that there was one more quote. I love this one too, because to me it sort of describes what humans have been living off and the courage that humans have been showing to basically to be able to get out of bed in the morning. And it's from Olive Schreiner. She was Jeremy calls her a prophetess from South Africa, and she just tells this story about when she was a child. So when she was a child, not yet 9 years old, I walked out one morning along the mountaintops on which my home stood. The sun had not yet risen, and the mountain grass was heavy with dew. I walked till I came to a place where a little stream ran. I had got up so early because I had been awake much of the night and could not sleep longer. My heart was heavy. My physical heart seemed to have a pain in it, as if small, sharp crystals were cutting into it. All the world seemed wrong to me. Why did everyone press on everybody and try to make them want to do what they wanted? Why did the strong always crush the weak? Why did we hate and kill and torture? Why was it all as it was? Why had the world ever been made? The sharp little crystals seemed to cut deeper into my heart. And then, as I sat there looking at the stream, the sun began to rise. It shot its light across the long grassy slopes of the mountains and struck a little mound of earth at the water's edge. All the flowers and the grasses on it turned to bright gold, and the dewdrops hanging from them were like diamonds. And the water in the stream glinted as it ran. And as I looked at that almost intolerable beauty, a curious feeling came over me. I seemed to see a world in which creatures no more hated and crushed, in which the strong helped the weak, and men understood each other and forgave each other and did not crush others but to help. And there came to me as I sat there a joy such as besides I have experienced, a joy without limit. This feeling that came to me, a feeling not easy to put in words, was like this: you also are a part of the great universe. What you strive for, something strives for. You are moving towards something. In the long years which have passed, the adult has seen the greed, the ambition, the cruelty, and the falsehood of the individual soul in so hideously enlarged and wholly unrestrained a form that it might be forgiven to one who cried out the powers that lie behind life? Is it not possible to put a sponge and wipe up humanity from the earth? Is it a stain? It is a stain. And very honestly, Schreiner also conceded that even within my own soul, I have perceived elements militating against all I've hungered for. She went on, I have tried to wear blinkers. I've tried to look nakedly in the face of those facets which make most against all hope. And yet in the darkest hour, the consciousness which I carried back with me on that morning has never wholly deserted me. That which was for the young child only a vision has, in the course of a long life's experience, become a hope, which a growing knowledge of human nature and human life does endorse. Somewhere, sometime, someplace. And for me anyway, it just talks about that every human has been through that night that Olive Schreiner is describing there. When we grow up in this world, we can all see the horror in it. We can feel the horror in it. We know the horror, and what becomes worst of all is when you see it and know it in yourself. And no wonder she wasn't sleeping. I mean, and I know in myself there is that part of me, that human condition inside of me that I lived with. Should we wipe humanity off the face of the earth with a sponge, or should I wipe myself? That happened to me at when in the younger years, when you're thinking about this honestly. But anyway, and that's what we're here today. We're going to play another video. If you saw the last one, it's with Jeremy Griffith. He's explaining this time when every human goes through. It's from about the ages from 12 to 15 when we're thinking and trying to sort out what is going on with us. These big questions: who are we, and why do we do them, and why all this horror on earth and in myself? And he talks about, with Brian Carlton, and the amazing thing, he's a journalist from Australia, and Brian came out to do an interview with Jeremy, and but it's just amazing. When anybody talks to Jeremy, they end up being able to talk about what's the most core and important to them, and you can just see how Brian just starts to tell his story about when he went through what Jeremy calls resignation when he was a teenager. And it's just an awesome interview and a discussion between them. And then Jeremy goes on to explain the human condition and give us a path out of all the horror and the madness. So I think it's an awesome presentation, and we're just going to watch that. It's going to go for about an hour, and then after that, we're going to come back and we've got some more WTM members from around the world to discuss what we've watched or answer any questions that come in. And we've got Annie and Sam, they're founding WTM members from Sydney. And we've got Ange, and she's from WTM Ballarat. And we've got Ari from WTM Melbourne. And we've got Bill and Cindy from WTM East Coast Canada. So anyway, we're going to get together after the meeting, after watching Jeremy, and we'll see you in about an hour.
My name is Brian Carlton. I'm an Australian journalist, commentator and broadcaster, and I'm here with biologist Jeremy Griffith to discuss his forthcoming book, Is It to Be Terminal Alienation or Transformation for the Human Race? Before receiving an advance copy of Is It to Be, I was already aware of Jeremy's work. In fact, I interviewed Jeremy on my radio show about one of his earlier books. I remember when I opened the interview to the listeners to call in, there was so much interest that the interview went for almost 2 hours, and I'm really not exaggerating. I know that Jeremy caused a similar response when he spoke on Carolyn Jones' famous radio show, The Search for Meaning. In that case, the interview gained one of the biggest responses Carolyn had ever received in the many, many hundreds of programs she made over the years. I think the response was second only to an interview she did with a nun in South America. I also know Jeremy's 2003 book, A Species in Denial, was a bestseller in Australia, I know, because I bought one and read it several times. So I'm very much looking forward to this discussion. Jeremy, tell me about this new book you've written.
Firstly, this is the Spoon Man. For many years, for many years, Brian was the compere of a popular radio program on Triple M in Sydney, where he was affectionately known as the Spoon Man, the professional stirrer. He was the Wolfman Jack of the airwaves in Australia. So that's a bit of background on who Brian really is. When we're about 12 years old, because the adults sort of living in denial of the human condition and learnt to do that, adolescents start seeing the imperfection of life around them and start wrestling with that and thinking deeply about it. And they soon realise that for some reason adults don't want to talk about it, so they're left on their own. So at about 12, they actually start trying to sort of understand. At 9, kids are sort of flailing out at the imperfections of the world and frustrated. But we actually changed from going from primary school to senior school is around 12, and that's actually in recognition that there's some real psychological change from flailing out at the world in their late childhood when you get bullying and so forth, the so-called noisy nines. They suddenly become sober, deeply thoughtful adolescents, and that's when they go to senior school. Because there is this big shift. The brain of children shifts from, flailing out in frustration at the imperfection of life gets you nowhere. Ultimately, you're going to have to stop and try to understand why the world's imperfect. So they actually start thinking deeply. They change from being an extrovert to a sobered introvert. And so around 12, when they go to senior school, they start this search for trying to understand the human condition, the imperfection of human life begins and it deepens. So they keep thinking about it. They've learnt that the adult world doesn't want to talk about it, and everyone's sort of pretending everything's fine, and they can see quite clearly it isn't. So by the time they get about 14 or 15, something serious starts to happen. They start to discover the human condition within themselves, the imperfections within themselves, that there's those angers and meanness and selfishness and indifference to others. And they're still thinking completely honestly. They're still facing the issue of the human condition. So when it actually deepens, they hit this crisis point normally around 15 or so, when they finally discover the human condition within. They're trying to face that down, and it's suicidally depressing trying to try to confront it without an understanding of it. And so they go into this crisis that I've called resignation, when they resign to thereafter living in denial of the human condition. They go on become an escapist, a superficial life. They never want to go near that dark corner again. So it's very rare to find any description of a kid going through this, because the adult world, as I said, have already resigned, so they don't want to listen. But there are some marvellous descriptions of children going through resignation. This is probably one of the best. It's from American Pulitzer Prize-winning child psychologist Robert Coles, and he describes this encounter he had with a child going through this crisis point in resignation, and I think everyone will be able to relate to this. I tell of the loneliness many young people feel. It's a loneliness that has to do with self-imposed judgment of sorts. I remember a young man of 15 who engaged in light banter, only to shut down, shake his head, refuse to talk at all when his own life and troubles became the subject at hand. He had stopped going to school. He sat in his room for hours listening to rock music. The doors closed. I asked him about his head-shaking behaviour. I wondered whom he was thereby addressing. He replied, no one. I hesitated, gulped a bit, and took a chance. Not yourself. He looked right at me now in a sustained stare for the first time. Why do you say that? He asked. I decided not to answer the question in the manner in which I was trained, basically as an adult, to deny the issue of the human condition. Instead, with some unease, I heard myself saying, I've been there. I remember being there. Remember when I felt I couldn't say a word to anybody. The young man kept staring at me, didn't speak. When he took out his handkerchief and wiped his eyes, I realised they had begun to fill. Now, obviously, what had happened is the boy was in tears because Coles had reached him with some recognition and appreciation of what he was wrestling with. I mean, Coles had shown some honesty about what the boy could see and was struggling with, namely the horror of the hypocrisy of human behaviour, including his own behaviour. So that's a marvellous little capturing of this moment. And the child is in his own room, he's immersed, lost in himself, he can't relate to the world world's not acknowledging what he's wrestling with. He's dying a million deaths inside himself, and there's lots of other descriptions of going through this tight corner. So that's there's a lot more about the process of resignation that children go through, but what the essence of it is that it reveals just how terrifying the issue of the human condition really is, because these children are actually trying to face it down and can't. It's just leading to suicidal depression. And they have to jump off this cliff, catch her in the rye, catch them before they're jumping off the cliff, resign themselves to living in denial of the human condition and never go near it again. So the problem my book's got is when it brings that brings them back into contact with that, they tend to be psychologically don't want to go near it.
That resonates with me. I was that young man. I locked myself in my room listening to music of alienation, and at the same time reading everything I could get my hands on, in the belief that if I just found out why nobody's talking about this, then I will be able to understand it. So yeah, that absolutely resonates with me. Listening to music and reading, locked in my room for a couple of years as an early teenager, it was a very real thing.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people can remember that, and that's so precious to, that's the benefit of using the resignation explanation, because people can actually remember going through it, and once they know that they've been through it, then they've got that anchor to know, it was a terrifying subject.
It's a life-changing experience. It really is. Certainly was for me. Yeah.
That's what happens when you tell them about resignation. It helps, because then people are connected then for the first time for a long time in their life to that experience.
Well, I wished I'd known then what I know now.
Yeah.
And what you've said is pretty terrifying, but I remember as a kid listening to rock music. There's one particular song that got me, Midnight Oil. I think it's called Only the Strong. And the opening lines in the song are, "When I'm locked in my room, I just want to scream." And as a young kid going through this process, it said to me, there is at least one other human on earth who's been through what I'm going through now. And that spoke volumes to me. Just a couple of lines of music was all it took to make me go, I feel a little bit better about this than I did.
Yeah, someone reached you with some honesty.
Absolutely.
Exactly like Cole's situation and Catch Her in the Rye. Finally, yeah, that's how precious, that's how lonely it is going through this, and how, by inference, how dishonest the adult world is. It's all resigned, no one's talking any truth. You find one little bit of truth, and you just lock on, it saves your life.
And indeed, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. I went from being terribly alienated to just a little less alienated, which helped a lot. Yeah, helped a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, yeah, I mean,
just the number of times I reflect, that chat we had in the book has stuck in my mind for a long time, and I see things all the time, and I go, Jeremy, no, that's that.
Yeah,
that's this, and I can see the denial, and I have conversations with people about this is massive amount of denial going on here, and they sort of look at you, like eyes glaze over, and what are you talking about? Like, oh, forget it. So yeah, don't underestimate the extent to which your earlier works had an impact on me in terms of how I think about what I'm seeing, how I interpret behaviour, and I worked up this ability to be able to work out what a person was like in the first 5 or 6 seconds of a conversation with them on the telephone, and I could second guess why they're saying what they're saying, and hear the subtext in their words, and it was hugely valuable as a broadcaster when you're taking lots and lots of calls from people who are fundamentally strangers to you, and they start telling you about their life story and things like that, and you can plug into what they're talking about and how they're talking about it, and a lot of that came from your books, because you you would be able to, you do this, you walk in, you can observe the denial in people. You can observe the souls who are not real happy with themselves.
You finally got insight into what's happening.
You've
got the riddle, the tool to make sense of it at last.
But it works.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. It's not a when you just read the book, it sort of sounds esoteric and kind of out there, but the trickle down transfer to everyday life and everyday human relationships and experiences has been hugely valuable. And I don't say that pissing in your pocket. I'm really not. It did make a huge difference. Huge.
Anyway, well, that's the benefit of hanging in there. But yeah, those poems and things, they do capture the truth about the state of the world and what the unresigned mind, the adolescents can see.
I wished I had the thing as a 15-year-old. I mean, I really do. I was reading quite, fairly thick, dense books at 14, 15, but I wish I had this one. Would have saved me 2 or 3 years of angst.
Yeah.
Easily. And probably another, 6 or 7 years of trying to work out what I wanted to do with my life and how hard I did actually want to change everything. And I'm not a sort of issues-based crusader as such, but there's just so much around that needs work, needs fixing. And I had this ability or not, I'm not sure, but a capacity to work out a way where we could do this better, how we could do it better. It's my fight. It's my personal fight. I was not going to let it beat me. And if I can't quite accept the way the world is, then I'm not going to sit down and do nothing. I will use whatever I have at my disposal, which in my case was a microphone and a transmitter, to try and at least make people think about the process of change. Giving up was never an option. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always thought, Brian, that we call you people like you, ships at sea, people that didn't properly resign. They didn't pull into a port when the storms came. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a torturous choice to make, because then you're forever tumbled around by the imperfection of life. But
it's honest, Jeremy.
Yeah.
It's honest.
Yeah.
I live my life honest with myself,
yeah.
And I sleep soundly at night. Yeah. I'm happy with my choices, as difficult as they were, and are. I'm happy, personally happy with the choices I made back then. Not easy choices, very difficult, but.
Yeah, but it does make you a heretic, and all the pain that goes with that. And like you told me earlier, you try to play it in the corporate world, and you're back there out there in the front lines of trying to shake up the box.
I've always had issues with people telling me how I should think and what I should say and what opinions I should have. They're very precious things to me, and I want to own mine, and I've tried as best I could to do that. So I really resent being told to toe any particular line by anybody, and I have since I was a child. Ask my mum, she'll tell you. From about the age of 8, it was, no, I'm going to do it my way because I think my way is better.
Yeah.
And if you wanted an explanation as to why my way is better, I'm happy to give that to you. Not a problem. But I just had to be. It seemed to me the only way out of this was to be as honest with myself as I could be.
Yeah, well, that's the strange paradox of the human condition, because we do resign, but then we pay such a price, becoming such a fraud and so dishonest, because we're not looking at things truthfully ever again.
Yeah.
We're just lost in a sea of bullshit, really, from there on. And we get to a point not too long after that where we're wishing we could get back to some honesty. So when you don't fully let go and you keep the windows open a little ajar, talking to Harry Prosen, he's like that too. He didn't quite shut the windows properly and left them ajar and kept searching all his life for some truth. And when it came along, and in the form of the documentary proposal, when he read that, he just loved it, because he was reading some stuff that spoke to him, that part of himself that was unresigned.
Yeah.
And brought it back to life, and it was just so reinforcing. It's like what happened to Coles and
it's absolutely. And I relate to that story so vigorously. That was he might as well have been talking about me. I was that kid, and I did a lot of reading of a lot of disciplines, the various faiths. You have a crack at that first and see whether there's any answers there. For me, there wasn't. Then science. It had some answers, but was ultimately reductionist. And I was getting into philosophers and some pretty strange stuff just to try and work out whether anybody did have an answer to this, whether there was any kind of coherent description of why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And the only thing that even came vaguely close to that was your books.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the trouble I've got, I mean, if everyone was unresigned, like you before this, we were talking together and you were saying, Jeremy, you know, if you had a book for children when they're going through resignation, save their life, you know, and they're your natural audience, because once you get talking to adults who are resigned, they're deaf to this.
Yeah, and I've been doing that my whole life as a professional communicator and broadcaster. You can see the veil of denial go up over their eyes when you raise the truth with them about something, and they honestly don't want to know. I thought early teens, sort of 13, 14, 15, is about the right age to be able to crack through some of that early denial and get to them before they
jump off the cliff,
or indeed build such a vigorous wall where they're locked behind and they don't want to open up and it's easier just to hide there behind the wall. If you can get to them before they start cementing those bricks in. That'll be your generational change, I think, but it'll be kids that age that will most get what you're talking about because they're going through it.
Yeah, well, it'll be great when we can actually take a presentation of this, especially for resigning kids before they jump off the cliff and before they cement those bricks in, as you so accurately said. It'll be very, very precious, and as Catcher in the Rye, catch them before they're jumping off the cliff. So, but we have to get a foothold in the real world and in the adult world before we can, you know, get some sort of real support for this. So that's the conundrum that this book faces. So you've articulated the whole dilemma and what we're up against and the beauty of finally somewhere there's some truth on this world that speaks to that part of ourselves that everyone's blocked off. So yeah, that's the whole riddle. How do you get through those cemented in bricks? And start the world in the other direction. But anyway, but yeah, the point about that song, "Life in Mind," like Midnight Oil, is it speaks to some truth about the state of the world.
There's a lot of descriptions of alienation in art, in music, in poetry. I often wonder whether those people who are exploring those areas will get what you're talking about more so than perhaps a rigid, scientifically trained mind. Just wonder sometimes. Yeah,
no. Well, I mean, artists. That's the trick with really good poetry or music or literature. The trick is to allude to the human condition, sort of take people as close as they can go without sort of actually confronting it. Because without the explanation of the human, the defence for it, it's just too...
it's almost a reflection of it, isn't it? Yeah. You're reflecting the human condition but not doing anything to explain it, why it is.
Yes, that's right. Because until you can explain it, you really can't take them in too close to the fire. Yeah. But you can dance in close to it. And any good literature, like I wouldn't be surprised that Robert Coles didn't get the Pulitzer Prize for that actual one paragraph. It's that honest and it's that precious. In you know, I mean, he's a child psychologist. He's written this book and he talks about that and lets that truth out, and that's just so precious. So I mean, that's it. Great art, great literature. I mean, why did Bacon's painting, you know, get the highest price ever, or next only to Munch? Because they're speaking to the truth of this is us. This is how alienated and dead we really are. And yeah, so great art, great literature, poetry, music is really the stuff that gets close to the truth. But yeah, again, you can't go right there because we haven't found the defence for ourselves.
It's scary, isn't it? When that little inside voice comes up and says, "I remember this. I remember what it was like," and you go, "Ooh, go away.
That's
go
right.
away again. Just please be quiet."
Yeah. That's what. Yeah. So I've got to dig it up. I'm using resignation because everyone like you can remember being it. So that reconnects them to it, and then I've got a foothold to then explain, unpack the whole riddle of. Anyway, but those poems, those songs, "Life in Mind" is very there's incredible honesty there about the state of the world.
You can see why the radio interview went 2 hours, can't you?
You keep going, we keep cutting. We'll be cutting these on the.
We're just wrapping. Yeah.
And I keep coming back trying to make it link up to where we were. And I'm thinking, shit, this is so good. Oh, let's throw this out the back window. But he's a legend, this boy. He's out there. He's someone really precious to me because it's been pretty lonely doing this job. But he's always...
Yeah, I often think about you like that. I say, how do you keep doing this? You just keep pushing on and pushing on and pushing on and gathering around clearly some like-minded individuals who get it, and trying to grow the thing. It must be a lonely place to be a lot of the time.
Yeah, well, we've got some wonderful group because people can get through this. With this explanation, once you know it, you're defended. So then you're safe. You can run around in the realm of the human condition with safety, right? So the problem is to get them through the deaf effect stage and they can start hear it. And the people have got really interested and, created this studio and everything like that. They're people who got through the deaf effect, heard this, and it just grew and grew on them. Like you said, it just becomes more addictive because it keeps you've got the tools to unravel everything. You're seeing through the human condition. And that's really exciting. And so that's just only going to grow. So it's a slow beginning, this, because very few people, they've got so many bricks in the wall they can't even hear it. Yeah. But you've got to get a few. You've got to be very, very stubborn and determined and patient, really, patient. And then it'll start to, so it's a slow beginning with a fast finish, because once everyone gets, they won't want to retreat. You can't throw away this, when you know that you've got the keys to unlock the whole mystery of what it is to be human, it just grows and grows.
You will inevitably run up against vested interest, people who like the idea that the planet is the way it is because they profit from it in whatever way, be it financially or some other way, who'll like to maintain the status quo, who'll like to keep things just the way they are because it works for them. You'll be a threat to established religions. You'll be a threat to conventional thinking on pretty much everything. All the scientific disciplines, psychology, for example, psychiatry, you're not going to need anywhere near as many of those if people had this info. You're just not going to need that paradigm shift in how humans do their thing will be actively resisted. And I'm pretty sure you felt that over the past couple of decades.
We had a big court case, the biggest in Australia's history, and all that's invested interest in living in Plato's cave of denial, because they don't want the truth to come out. In fact, the persecutors actually said, you're shaking the black box inside of people and you can't succeed.
It was curious that the ABC decided to put up a man of the cloth to analyse your work, which I thought was
same happened with Darwin, because old Bishop Wilberforce, he stood up at that great debate at Oxford and he said, was it your grandfather or your grandmother that was related to an ape, And that's when old Huxley stood up and he said, I'd rather be related to an ape than a great man who misused his intellect to deny truth, and won the debate. Yep. But traditionally it's always the people of the church that, fundamentalist in their thinking and don't want to open up and try to make understanding of things. So, we're invested interest. But the biggest invested interest of all is in denial, is in the resigned state. Wanting to, once you've built those walls in, you don't want it to be broken down. So
they'll try and shut you up.
Yeah, they do. They've tried all those sort of things. So we have to be self-sufficient in everything we do because of that. It's the only way we can have a chance of getting these ideas out there.
An uphill battle, but a thoroughly worthy one.
Yeah, well, that's right. But psychologically, I know what we're trying to do. We're trying to turn this corner. It's the biggest paradigm shift of all, from living in denial to not. And that's why Plato's, what he described will happen when you take them out of the cave. Mm-hmm. They won't hear a single word you said. Not initially, he said. And so, it's fair warning. You try to drag them out of the cave and you're going to get a flogging. And so it's just part of the journey. But what drives me is just my love of this other world. That's so much better and so much truer, this honest world. Mm. So it's like you see, you're holding on to what you knew to be true against a tidal wave of a tsunami of bullshit, right? But you said it earlier. You said, but what I love is that I'm being honest, and I treasure that above all that other.
Absolutely.
So that's what drives me too. I just live for this other world where we don't have to be dishonest anymore. That's what got me to these understandings. And
As a commentator on all things, I have to have a clarity of comprehension, a clarity of analysis. And the only way I can achieve that clarity is to be ruthlessly honest, even if the conclusion I'm reaching I find personally disturbing or scary, horrifying. The honesty, the self-honesty is the important thing. I can't do my job unless I'm honest.
Yeah, well, the whole of this book is based on that premise that once you're living in denial, you can't find the truth. You can't find the truth with lies. It's just fundamentally impossible. So, for example, the whole of chapter 1, and I talk about it in a moment, but I go through all the chapters in my book and how each one is access truth, and that was doing it. And the only way I've done it is by being honest and not being in denial. And when you're not living in denial of the human condition, you can actually all these truths that we've been looking for are so obvious.
Yes, they are. That's exactly right. It's very simple. It's not hard.
Yeah.
The end process, the revelation, if you like, is easy and reassuring and calming and self-accepting.
Yeah.
Getting there is the difficult bit. Yeah. Once you have the revelation, it's the clarity of it is euphoric.
Yeah, well,
almost.
All these answers that I've found, I didn't require a smart brain. It's just not living in denial. Just thinking simply and truthfully is how I found these answers. And they're sitting there for anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
They're self-evident if you're not wanting to avoid them. So, that's the thing. This synthesis is produced from exactly what you just said. Just, they're not actually, they are revelations in the sense that they're revealed. They're there waiting to be revealed. All you got to do is strip off the denial and they flop out. And that's all I've ever done.
But that process, the process of stripping off the denial, that's the difficult part. Yeah. Once you've done that, it's relatively simple from there on in. I found it's the answers become glaringly obvious to the next thing you have a look at, and you. I hate to use the word epiphany because it has a religious connotation that I really don't want to give it. It's not an emotional. Well, it sort of isn't emotional, but it's an intellectual epiphany. It's an epiphany of mind. My understanding of this is now better than it was. I'm now more complete. Yeah. I have a more complete understanding of myself, everybody around me, the society at large, the way the planet works. It's a revelation. But again, I hesitate to use that in a religious sense because it's a different, it's a quantifiably different thing. Yeah. But it has a similar sort of impact on you as you wake up the next morning feeling more invigorated, more able to deal with the world because your level of understanding of it is so much higher.
That's what all I've ever done is taught myself to hang on. I call it like think like a child or think like a stone. If I'm not getting there, I'm just not thinking simply enough, and letting the child and the simple obvious thing to come out, and I just got better and better at it. And exactly that when you do get to that clean state and just let it come out, it's so obvious. It's just stunning. You just think, that's amazing, and it's like an epiphany. It's very exciting, and that's all I've ever done. I just keep taking one step, and I just keep learning. That's how I got to all these insights. Yeah. But when you put the full synthesis together using that device of just thinking truthfully, then you take it back. As Plato said, when someone gets outside the cave and starts not living inside it, they're facing the sun, the truth, they're thinking truthfully, and then they go back in the cave and try to release them all. The cave prisoners, rebel, and he actually said that they'll try and kill him, Yeah. I mean, in my case, they didn't actually try and kill me. We live in more civilized times than that, but in effect, they did. They did everything they could to smash me off the face of the earth. Yeah. So everything you're saying is completely, making sense of everything that I've been through, and your own life has been through.
But you have your truth, and you've stuck to your truth, and you've fought for your truth. And they're all admirable qualities in a person. You can't criticise somebody for arguing their case, especially when the kind of work you're doing is so new to people, conceptually new to people. It's always going to be, if I can use the vernacular, pushing it uphill. Yeah. But good on you for keeping at it, because
you're right. They're actually totally sincere in what they're saying, and they're denial. They don't know that they're in denial.
No, that's right.
So that, you can't. I'm compassionate. I'm not. I know why they're doing what they're doing. But I've got to somehow find a way through that wall of denial to get them to reaccess the truth. So it is a hard, slow process. But I'm no longer criticising them. I'm actually bringing them the understanding. Yeah. So they actually want the reconciling understanding of the human condition, but they're never going to find it from their failure trap, because they're living in denial. You can't find it inside the cave. So I'm saying, look, I was out here, I found this truth. Here it is, liberates you all the thing you want, but they're so committed to denial, they're not receptive to it. So, you can knock on a deaf man's door forever, It's a slow process, and we've just got to be patient.
One of my favourite expressions for lots of things is it's a process, not an event. I can't think of anything that more applies that saying might apply to as your work. I mean, it isn't a process, a long way from being any kind of event. But when you get it, for the individual, when you get it, it is an event.
Yes.
You remember the day.
Yep.
You remember the section of the book. You remember when it happened. It stays with you. It's fresh.
Yeah. As to how long it'll take, Chardin once said, the truth only appears once to set the world ablaze. And it's true. It just needs a critical mass of influential people to come together and say, no, this book is really seriously important. It really has got through to the other side. And then all those that are living in denial and just treating it dismissively, they're forced to think again. And that's where you get this change of momentum. So that's why we're making such a huge effort with this book, to get that change of momentum, to get that base group of people who have managed to get through that wall of denial and discover just how honest this book is. And Harry's the first. I mean, he's amazingly just standing on his front foot and just saying it like it is. So, and then we need a few more dominoes to fall like that, and then suddenly the tide's turning. There is a base of support, and it'll flow, because the world is so hungry for some truth, some answers. So once there's enough base of support, then the tide changes rapidly, because it is like a sea of dishonesty out there, and this book is an island of sanity. And everyone's looking for just that, like you were when you were 15. You're reading, you were scrounging all the library, all the great tombs, of looking for some answers.
I got to the point where I started reading Encyclopedia Britannica, reading it as a book from the beginning, thinking the answers might be there.
Right.
That's not a joke, by the way. They're quite literal.
No. The point I'm making overall is that now that we are aware of how terrified we are of the issue of the human condition, I'm now finally in a position to explain everything about our behaviour. And for example, I know in chapter 1 that I can now, with having got in place our fear of the human condition, it allows me to explain the reason why biologists have not been able to make any real progress in understanding human behaviour, obviously because they're all resigned and living in denial of the human condition, and so they're not thinking truthfully, and you can't find the truth with lies. You can't find the truth if you're living in the cave of denial. And in chapter 2, now that the reader's connected with how we're living in denial of the human condition, allows me to explain the human condition, because that explanation is actually fairly obvious. All that's been blocking access to it is our fear of the human condition once again. And I'll be telling you what the explanation of the human condition in chapter 2 is in a moment. And in chapter 3, I'm able to explain the integrative meaning of existence, which our denial of the human condition has also blocked access to. And in chapter 4 and 5, I'm able to explain the obvious explanation for the origins of our altruistic moral nature, the voice of which is our conscience. Because again, that truth has hitherto been blocked by fear of the human condition. And in chapter 6, I'm able to explain why humans became conscious when other animals haven't, and the true nature of consciousness. And again, you will see that those explanations are relatively obvious, but they've been blocked by denial of the human condition. And in chapter 7, I'm able to describe the whole psychological journey that the human race has been on, from ignorance, from way back when we were ignorant ape ancestors, pre-conscious state, some 8 million years ago, right up to the present psychologically upset state of Homo sapiens sapiens. And again, this story has never been able to be told before because everyone's been living in denial of the human condition. And finally, in chapter 8, the ability now for the human race to be transformed from living in denial of the human condition to living free of that horrific state depended on overcoming the historic denial of what the human condition really is and its explanation.
Okay, Jeremy, can you give us a quick sketch of what this wonderful explanation of the human condition in chapter 2 of the book is that saves the world? What is the human condition?
Okay. Firstly, I need to explain that historically we've used the excuse that we humans are competitive, aggressive and selfish because of our animal heritage, that we have savage animal instincts that make us fight and compete for food and shelter and territory and a mate and so forth. But obviously this can't be the real cause for our divisive behaviour, because descriptions of our behaviour, our human behaviour, such as egocentric and arrogant and deluded and optimistic, pessimistic, artificial, hateful, mean, immoral, guilty, evil, depressed, inspired, psychotic, alienated, all recognise the involvement of our species' fully conscious thinking mind. Mm. That there's a psychological dimension to our behaviour. Mm. We don't suffer from a genetic opportunism-based, non-psychological animal condition, but the conscious mind-based, psychologically distressed human condition. I mean, there's this article's just come out this week in the Smithsonian. It's actually putting forward a theory to explain the human condition. It says that we are such successful species because we are proficient problem solvers, which is code for that we are fully conscious beings, able to understand cause and effect. And it says that the reason we are so aggressive and competitive is because we can't trust others to exercise self-restraint, which forces us to match their competitiveness. But how and why were we humans able to become conscious when other animals haven't? And even more importantly, what was the psychological consequences of us becoming conscious? What is the psychosis in addressing and explaining real biological explanation of our present competitive and aggressive human condition? I mean, these aren't answers. It's no wonder everyone's lost faith in science's ability to bring understanding to our lives. I mean, science has become a farcical joke. It's stalled and festering, and it's leaving humanity stalled and festering because scientists are all resigned to living in denial of the human condition, and you can't explain the human condition from a position of lying. As Plato said, you've got to be outside the cave of denial to explain the human condition. I mean, again, chapter 1 of my book reveals all the existing theories in biology about human behaviour, and they're not really revealing that at all. What they're really interested in is not explaining human behaviour, but trying to avoid the human condition. Mm-hmm. So when you read chapter 1, the latter part of chapter 1, it's a complete demolition of all the current theories of biology of human behaviour, that they're all completely superficial and fake and dishonest. Okay, so let's get serious. What's the real psychosis addressing explanation of the human condition that's presented in chapter 2 of my book? And as I sort of intimated, it's actually a very obvious truth. I mean, in Genesis, in the Bible, it says Adam and Eve were once living in the Garden of Eden, presumably living in a sort of idyllic kind of happy pre-human condition, cooperative, loving state, right? Which is how we acquired our altruistic moral instincts and the expression within us, which is our conscience, is explained in chapter 4 and 5, and that was actually through nurturing. But yeah, we once living in this innocent, cooperative, loving state, which is the bonobos are a living example of the threshold of that living in that state. So we were once living in the Garden of Eden, this cooperative state. Then we took the fruit from the tree of knowledge. And in that story, presumably meaning we became conscious, tree of knowledge, searching for understanding. And then in that story, it says, then we became evil and full of sin and were banished, thrown out of the Garden of Eden, right? So that's the best we've been able to do. But now let's look a bit more closely at that. It says that we were once living in a cooperative, loving state, and then we're in an innocent, pre-human condition, Garden of Eden-like state, and then we took the fruit from the tree and became conscious. So now, with the benefit of what science has been able to teach us about how nerves and genes process information, we analyse that. We actually, the explanation of human condition is right there in front of us. Because clearly, if we were once instinctively, like other animals, orientated to how to behave, to our life, and then we become conscious, which is the nerve-based learning system of the conscious brain, which can understand cause and effect, and so it's a self-adjusting system. Obviously, that self-adjusting system needs to challenge the instinctive, already established instincts for the management of our life. So there's going to be a clash emerge but the conscious mind has to challenge the instincts because it's now become proficient in understanding cause and effect, and it needs to find an understanding of it.
So this is a curious mind.
Yes, so this is a curious mind. It's now needing to understand, right? So we're in parallel with the Genesis story at this point, where Adam and Eve, to metaphorically describe the original humans, took the fruit from the tree of knowledge. They become conscious, right? But clearly, once they become conscious, that's a self-adjusting system. They're managing their life from a basis of understanding of cause and effect. So they're making self-adjust. So the best way to explain how this clash manifests itself between the emerging conscious mind and the already established instinctive mind is I use a little analogy. Like, we already know that birds sort of follow instinctive flight paths, like the storks in Africa. They fly up around the coast of Africa and they nest on the rooftops of Europe. And they've learnt that through natural selection. Obviously, the birds that had a genetic makeup and inclined them to fly across the Sahara all got frizzled. So now all storks instinctively know how to fly around the coast. They know exactly where to fly and not to fly, right? But they don't understand where they should and shouldn't fly. So now we want to know what happens. So we call one of these storks Adam Stork. So it relates to the story of Garden of Eden. So we call him Adam Stork. It's got a different ending, the story. And we put a fully conscious brain, such as humans have, self-adjusting brain on the head of one of these storks, right? And so, and we're going to jump in an ultralight and watch the equivalent of the human condition emerge, right? So we're flying along, and old Adam Stork's got a conscious mind now, and he's following the instinctive flight path, which goes along the coast, around the coast of Africa. But he's starting to think for himself. And so he looks down, he sees an island with some apple trees. And he thinks, why not fly down there and have a feed of apples? I mean, he's got no knowledge yet. No reason why he should or he shouldn't. And he's only going to find knowledge by experimenting in different understandings. So he thinks, why not? So he carries out his first grand experiment in self-adjustment based on he's trying to understand the world. So he heads down towards the island. So we see him veer off, right? Mm-hmm. Now, obviously his instinctive self, because the instinctive flight path doesn't go down the island, it goes straight up the coast, is going to, in effect, pull him back on course, try to pull him back to the flight path. And so we can see, we're in the ultralight we're watching, we can see Adam Stork hesitate. You know, he's flying off, and then his instincts are starting to criticize him. I mean, our mind, our instincts can tell us when we need to have a drink or have some food, and our conscious mind can override that or not. So now old Adam Stork is in a dilemma. Does he obey his instincts and fly back on course, never search for knowledge, or does he persevere with his search for knowledge? Mm-hmm. Well, clearly he can't. I mean, he could fly back on course and feel good and not feel condemned anymore by his instincts, but he'll never find knowledge. So he's got to persevere. So he hesitates, but then he decides, I know I've got to do what I've got to do. I can't. So he perseveres with his search for knowledge. And he heads down towards the island, which means the instincts are going to criticise him louder and louder. And so he's in this bind between his instincts. I mean, ideally at that moment, before the shit hit the fan, if you like, everything got messed up, he should have sat down on a limb with his instinctive self, as it were, and had a little discussion. Said, now listen, you acquired your perfect orientation where to fly through natural selection, through the gene-based learning system, which through natural selection can give species orientation. But orientation is not understanding. I'm now using a conscious mind which can understand cause and effect. It's based on the nerve-based learning system where you have memory, and once you've got memory, you've got the basis for understanding cause and effect. So I'm an insightful learning system. So you're perfectly orientated. You're talking to his instinctive self, but you don't understand where we should and shouldn't fly. So by all means, tell me when I'm off course, but don't criticise me. But you see, he's in a catch-22. He hasn't got any knowledge yet. He doesn't even know about nerves and genes. Science hasn't even been invented. So he's got no ability to explain himself. Mm-hmm. So what did he naturally, unavoidably do, old Adam Stork? There were three things I suggest he couldn't avoid doing. First of all, if he couldn't refute the criticism emanating from his instinctive self, he had to block it out. So he put his hands over his ears and said, I'm not going to listen to you. So denial became a part of his makeup, which means alienation. He's blocking out these unconfrontable truths coming from his instinctive self or orientations. And the second thing is he gets angry towards the criticism. He tries to restrain his anger, but he says, listen, mate, get off my case. I'm not bad. You're implying that I am and I'm not, but I can't explain why I'm not. So he gets aggressive. And thirdly, his ego, which just means conscious thinking self, if you look it up in the dictionary, his ego or conscious thinking self becomes embattled. It becomes centered or centric, focused on trying to validate himself. So he's now become egocentric, forever looking for reinforcements, anything that will relieve him from this criticism. So he's desperate for reinforcement, for relief from this incessant criticism. He can get a win out of a game of sport or anything, or get some success or some reinforcement. He's hungry for reinforcements. He's egocentric, insecure, in need of reinforcement. Mm-hmm. So old Adam Stork's become angry, egocentric and alienated, right, as an unavoidable consequence of having set out in search of knowledge.
Presumably he's being criticised also by the Storks who've continued going up the coast.
That's right.
On their instinctive path.
That's right.
So it's not just an internal criticism, a self-criticism, but there's external abuse even for breaking the rules. You're doing something different to the way we've always done it.
That's right. And since the natural world is all friends in effect of his original instinctive self, because he grew up with the natural world. Sure. By association, it's also condemning. So everybody's on his case. The other Storks who just want everybody to obey the ideals and obey the instinctive flight path, and the natural world, everything's condemning him. Now, but he's actually good, but he can't explain why he's good. I mean, just imagine after one day imagine if you're living in a village, and for some reason you have to plant thistles or something, right? But you can't explain why you got to plant them. And the whole town, is right against anybody planting weeds. So just imagine after a couple of days, you're going to be putting dead cats in your letterbox, and you go down to the shop and they're going to turn their back to you, and you're going to be ostracised. Now, you can't explain to them that you're good and not bad. In fact, you're a hero. The conscious thinking mind is obviously, the greatest invention nature's come up with. Most amazing creation. And the conscious mind needs to find knowledge, ultimately self-knowledge, understanding of the human condition. In this case, understanding of why he had to fly off course. And that's going to he's going to have to invent science. He's going to have to discover how nerves are different in the way they process information, which is the conscious mind, to the gene-based learning system, which processes information in a different way. It can give species orientation, but not understanding. One's an orientating system, one's an insightful system. And without that ability to explain himself, so you planted thistles. Everyone thinks you're bad, but in fact you're not. But you can't explain it. It's a terrible situation. Now, because obviously we're not migrating birds, so our instinctive orientation wasn't to a flight path, but actually to behaving cooperative and lovingly, which is Chapter 4 explains it was required through nurturing, and the bonobos are living in the threshold of that state. So our instincts to be cooperative and loving. So it was an absolute double whammy for us, because immediately we started flying off course in effect and challenging our instincts and becoming unavoidably to some degree angry, egocentric and alienated, which are all divisive traits, our instincts doubly condemned us then because it wants us to be cooperative, loving and selfless, and we're now competitive, aggressive and selfish. So it was a double whammy. As soon as we started to challenge the instincts and become upset, and because that upset's a better word than evil, there's no criticism anymore, we can understand that we are psychologically upset. Psych means soul or instinct, and so our instinctive self or soul or is been condemning us. So we buried it. We became psychotic, and our mind or nerve-based learning became neurotic. We started living in denial, blocking out the truth. So we became psychotic and neurotic. So these are unavoidable consequences of acquiring a conscious mind and setting out in search of knowledge in the presence of our instinctive self. We couldn't explain ourselves. We couldn't defend ourselves until we invented science. And since the conscious mind emerged some 2 million years ago in the human journey, we've been living for 2 million years unjustly condemned. So if the person who had to plant thistles was going to find it unbearable living in that village after one day or 1 week, imagine what 2 million years has done to us. We have been unjustly condemned for 2 million years. See, the story of Genesis, because this has got a different ending to the story of Genesis. It's the same fundamental thing. We once lived in the Garden of Eden, an innocent cooperative. Then we took the fruit from knowledge, became conscious. But then in that story, we became evil and were thrown out. But in this story, if we stand back and look at that story of Adam Stork, who's the hero of that story? Old Adam Stork, because he had to have the guts, the courage to defy his instincts and persevere with the search for knowledge. I mean, that marvellous song, The Man of La Mancha, or musical, says we had to march into hell for a heavenly cause, which captures the paradox of being a human. We had to suffer becoming upset, angry, egocentric and alienated in order to find knowledge. So Adam Stork is actually the hero, since the conscious mind is the best invention of nature, is the hero of the story of life on earth, because the conscious mind had to endure this corruption, this unjust condemnation, in order to fulfill its potential to become a competent understanding system.
It's a difficult conversation to have with Adam Stork, though, isn't it? To explain that to him so he would understand what's going on. And indeed to his colleagues, who are still, again, continuing up the coast and not knowing what this lunatic's doing.
What's difficult about sharing this understanding is because humans are living in denial of the human condition again, they're so committed to not looking at the psychology of our psychosis that we don't even admit, like Lang said, that many people argue it doesn't even exist, the human condition. That's how fearful we are of the whole subject area. So all the biological explanations don't recognise, which is chapter 1 of my book, that there's a psychological element, as I said. Okay. Explanations that we're red in tooth and claw and stuff, ignore the obvious fact that we suffer from the human condition, not the animal condition. We've never been able to defend ourselves with understanding, but at last we can. So that's 2 million years. But there's, I began at the beginning by saying there's this volcanic frustration inside of humans. But now we can understand where that's come from, how much anger there must be buried within us. Sure, we're civilized, it's trying to restrain it, but it's still underneath there. It comes out in war and sex and so on. And so that there is this volcanic frustration inside of humans. And now we can understand where it came from. How much frustration must there be in it? So this explanation says that Adam was the hero of the story of life on earth, not the villain he's been portrayed as for so long. So amazingly, this finally dignifies humans. It brings the reconciling, healing, understanding of the human condition that we've always needed. And it is an obvious truth when you sit down and look at our equation in an honest way.
So, Jeremy, how do we translate that understanding into a transformation of who we are?
Well, you recall that Adam Stork wouldn't have become psychologically upset if he could have explained why he had to fly off course and defy his instincts. So it follows that now that he can explain himself, all his upsets, all his anger, egocentricity and alienation subsides. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung was forever emphasising that wholeness for humans depends on the ability to own their own shadow. and which is what we can do now. We can understand where the dark volcanic forces in us comes from. I mean, the ancients had emblazoned across their temples, "Man, know thyself." Well, we can now know ourselves, understand ourselves. I mean, as Harry Brosen said in his introduction, "I have no doubt this biological explanation of the human condition is the holy grail of insight we have needed for the psychological rehabilitation of the human race." You have to read chapter 8 to learn just how this wonderful transformation occurs, but just to read one description of it. This is like seeing the world for the first time. It's like waking up from a nightmare. It's like 100 tons being lifted off your shoulders. So yes, the burden of guilt has finally been lifted from the human race. This is our moment of liberation. This is Liberation Day.
Jeremy, you're doing really important work. I say that as a fellow human with the condition. Keep at it. People read the book more than once. Some people like reading books or want to read a book on multiple times because they enjoy it. This is one you almost need to read 2 or 3 times to fully get the gist of what you're talking about. I wish you the best with your endeavour. We need it. It's been a great pleasure. It's good to catch up with you again, Jeremy.
So likewise, it's really precious. Thanks very, very much, Brian.
I've just got to say that was unbelievable. That was just so special, and that whole conversation. And goodness me, I mean, if Robert Coles got the Pulitzer Prize for just breaking the denial and being honest for that instant with that young man, I mean, God, Jeremy's going to get all the prizes there are, because he's with Adam Stork, all that biology of our psychology and the incredible identification and explanation of resignation. We can at last understand why we've had to live in denial, and that just unlocks everything. It's just the most extraordinary, beautiful gift humans can ever be given. And that was just so thrilling. And honestly, I loved when Brian Carlton said, "You never forget the moment when you actually really get this." And when you really understand resignation, for me, it just unlocked everything for me, because, you do have a memory. Most people do, like Jeremy said, and it's such a good connection, because when you reconnect with resignation, you really understand why you're so fearful of the human condition and why you've had to live in denial and why you can't stand in the face of the ideals and you had to resign to reality. And I remember saying to my mum, I just feel like I'm hardening, and so that personal connection with that point is just so incredibly precious, because that's the whole riddle Jeremy was explaining. We live in denial. How do we get out of denial? We're so alienated. How do we know we're alienated when we are alienated? It's such an incredible thing to have all that explained. And that was just so special. And like I said, to understand resignation for me unlocked the way I can live with this. I can stand beside the truth unashamed of my denial, of my immense upset, of my psychosis, and I can love the truth instead of feeling threatened or criticized by it. I can completely love it. I can completely support it. And personally, for me, to connect with that gave me access to Jeremy's incredible mind, because the difference between my mind, my thinking mind, which was dedicated to just this superficial existence, escaping the issue of the human condition, his mind is dedicated to confronting it. And that explained that to me, his unresigned mind versus my resigned mind. It took the criticism out of it. It took the heat out of it. And it explained the whole world to me, and it allowed me to be honest about my stain, about all those things that Tony read out at the beginning of the meeting. I could be honest about how psychologically upset I am and how distressed and lost I am inside. And that saved me, and therefore it can save the whole world. It just brings honesty and love to the whole world. And yeah, that was just astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always staggered hearing Jeremy speak, just taking you to a safe place where you can talk about this off limits place in yourself, and making it okay, making it safe, making it a wonderful freeing experience, where you can deal with it, you can talk about it, and you can finally be real. It's not, I just knew my whole life I was just a absolute charade, and I have this underlying thing that issue, that you're living with. But what about you guys? Has anyone got hit us with something good?
I have to say, I just wanted to jump in really quickly and just say that when I first came across this information and I saw Brian Carlton's video and Jeremy's interview with him, I was thinking, I don't know if I'd actually get into that, or I didn't know if I would relate, but I'm just so glad that I actually did listen to it. I listened to it on the podcast on a walk. And I think that was for me like a breakthrough in my own understanding of this information and resignation and how real it was. I just think Brian Carlton's video and interview was just so precious, because like it really did take me right back to my locked in my room and thinking I was just so alone, and I was just really, it's just such a lonely time of teenage years, and I was just so thankful that Brian was able to kind of talk about that, because it helped me be okay with admitting it that I was that same teenager as well. And just Jeremy's explanation of resignation and how we all had to go through it, and how it's such a heroic thing that that we did go through it, and now we can actually talk about it, and we're so defended, like we're so 100% okay with whatever happened or whatever like strategies you've adapted from that time. Like it was just so necessary to get the truth, really, for Jeremy to get the truth and solve the human condition. So I mean, it's just brilliant. I just wanted to kind of share my thoughts on that.
Yeah, well said, Ange. I might follow from there. I think I could talk about this for the rest of my life. That I've seen that video 4 or 5 times, and I just watched it, Annie, and my reaction was exactly what yours was. It was just like the most incredible hour I can remember experiencing, and it must be, how starved we are, how starved I've been of just any discussion about the truth. And as you go on this journey and you just break down those barriers, you see the same thing, for the 3rd or 4th time, and it's like the first time you've seen it, and you can just hear and bask in the incredible truth and the glory of it. And it's just amazing. I just wanted to share very quickly 2 experiences I had this week, which came to mind. That interview started talking about, children at 9 and 12 sort of in their noughties, and then getting into that resignation phase. And I went for a walk this week and came to there's a playground on this walk. And as I was walking past the playground, there was a group of about 30 kids, and they were 5 or 6 years old. There were 4 or 5 parents and a couple of teachers. Must have been a school excursion of sorts, but there were these 35 or 6-year-olds absolutely jumping out of their skin with excitement and laughter and screaming and skipping and holding hands and laughing and playing and jumping and climbing the swings, like the happiest, most exciting thing in their life. And I noticed myself as I was walking. It's a curved track. I was in a trance, and this was really just freaky for me. I was just in a trance, just staring at this huge group of children, smiling. I didn't notice the smile start, and it started with a small smile and a medium smile, and then just ended up like Ronald McDonald. I had this huge smile on my face, not smiling at anybody, not smiling to anybody, just smiling and tranced and fixated on this most beautiful, beautiful situation. This same situation 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't even have noticed. I would have just walked past the park, had absolutely no idea. And it's this book that allows me to see things now and hear things that were completely off limits before. And it's just incredible. Like, it's magic. And I thought, as I kept going on my walk, I thought, where did the smile come from? What happened? And I think two things I realized in that moment. One is I was that child. I don't remember that child, but I was that, super happy, excited, beautiful, beautiful child that's buried, somewhere really, really deep. So it just must have brought back a beautiful memory. But the second thing also is that it validates to me entirely what our natural state is, that the children, these beautiful children that didn't receive the unconditional selfless love they expected, but haven't yet reached the age where they're giving up on the adult world, are still full of life and are full of love and are full of excitement. That's going to be the whole world. That is what is waiting, multiplied by, 1 million. Like, we can't even imagine what it will be like when we do receive the nurturing. So I think I connected with that for the first time in my life. I could never see that before. It was real, it was genuine, it wasn't made up, I wasn't trying, it just happened naturally. And it was the most beautiful thing I wanted to share. And by pure chance, on the same day, I went and visited a neighbour a couple of hours later, and she's got a husband and wife, and the husband wasn't home, and she's got a 2-year-old. And as I rocked up, the 2-year-old ran down the driveway, and I've only seen the 2-year-old once before, and just gave me a big embrace. And I was embracing this 2-year-old, and the mother was just like, wow, and the kids' embrace was unbelievable. And my embrace for, maybe the first time in my life was just genuine, and there was no rush for this embrace to end. It might have been 2 or 3 minutes. There was just no let up from the kid, 2 humans hugging. And I realized I've got 4 beautiful children, but I've never been able to connect and embrace with any of them when they were 2 years old or even older in that way. And completely, explained and defended, and there's no shame and guilt about, who I was. But as Annie said, with this information, you can face any obstacle. There's no obstacle you can't face. And facing those individual realities of life under the duress of the human condition actually, frees up. It's the gateway. It's sort of that floodgates. It's the gateway that opens up, the ability to connect to this in unimaginable ways. Even last month, I wasn't able to connect the way I am today. And this never ends. And I get huge inspiration from, Tony and Sam and Annie and all the people in Sydney and all the global wavers. It's just the most incredible thing. And one final thing, if it's all right with you, Tony, I've been writing some very unremarkable and unimpressive stuff, but you tend to write stuff just to see where your head's at and to express things the way that makes sense to you. And just a couple of lines, if I can. It's I analogize our situation with a war. I was born into a war, and I've been in a war for 50 years, and I've been fighting with a sword and a shield, and I've been seeing my comrades fall, and I've had to, kill or not be killed, just fighting a war. That's life under the duress of the human condition, except it's a psychological war. It's not a physical war. And I was writing about, okay, so what now? the battle's over, which is a beautiful thing. I've had a shower, but there are scars, there are traumas, and I'm going to carry those, and that's fine. The battle's over. The hard thing for me is to watch my brothers and sisters still in this war, not knowing the battle's over. And that's the conjoint generations situation, and that's fine. So just a couple of lines. It's almost a call to arms, Tony, for me. Today and every day of my life, and every breathing and living minute is a call to arms. And I just jotted this down. So now a new battle begins. Not a battle on the battlefield, and not a battle between our instincts and our intellect, but a battle of love. A battle to share and support this information with the world, a battle to keep this information alive, to devote ourselves to this most selfless and most meaningful of causes, not a feel-good cause, but one to stop human suffering under the duress of the human condition. It'll be slow and difficult due to the death effect, and I know about that about as well as anyone on the planet. First, we must persuade our brothers and sisters that they are at war with themselves. This is the mother of all battles. So put on your armor of truth and love and join us in the battle to share Jeremy's love with the world, to support and love the world transformation movement with everything we have. Every single person that can access Jeremy's explanation of the human condition can now accept the responsibility and privilege to dedicate their life to this cause. The cavalry's coming. Hang on to your hats. We're going home.
Beautiful. Wow.
Awesome, Ari.
Well said.
Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, what you were saying there, Ari, really, resonated with me in a few places. One, your walk by the children's playground or the school. Bill and I had that very similar experience not too long ago. We couldn't see the school ground. We were walking through the forest, but we could hear just the children laughing and squealing and just having an amazing time outside. And we stopped and we looked at each other and said, imagine if those are the adults of the future. They're still full of this amazing energy and joy for life. And yeah, it was just so incredible to realize that now that we have this explanation for ourselves and we've just become so corrupted and battle weary and just worn out, but we can understand it all now, and we can come out from behind those walls of denial and just stand up in the truth that this understanding brings. We can see it all in its simplicity and also its complexity, but it's just an amazing journey every day. It's like, it just gets me up in the morning every day now, this stand up in this truth, and we can do that when we have this understanding. And it's just so wonderful to be in this group, in this new world that's forming. And it's so good.
Yeah, what Cindy said, what everybody else said, what Jeremy said, it is, the excitement is unimaginable. And, when Jeremy talks about the true world of our soul, I had no idea that such a world existed. I mean, if it was a dream, if it was an ancient memory, I kind of maybe had that, but I had no idea that it actually was here all around us today and is what's going to carry us into the future. It's just truly remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And that interview, like the rest of you, we had watched it before. but we watched it several times recently, and it's just pure gold. I just hung on every word that both Jeremy and Brian said. And, it was, just amazing. As you said, it took me back to that time as well, right? Mm-hmm. And I realized that, I ended up, it was just I can remember the moment when I was with a few friends, and, my sentiment was, I don't know if I can make it, if I can get through this, right? And I just hung on as a younger man. And if I had this understanding at that point, it would just, it would have, dramatically have changed my life. But nonetheless, I did have enough to get me through, and, and I ended up to be, keeping that window open. And, that was wonderful because I didn't give up hope. But at the same time, I was always looking out there, searching for the answers, and just didn't realize that, all of the love that we hold inside, and now we have access to, and it just, it's overwhelming at times. Yes, and thank you, all of you, and Jeremy especially, for saving our lives. And, I just know it. That's marvelous, wonderful. Always come to mind. And when Brian talked about that exhilaration, right, that euphoria, when you finally kind of break through, you feel that transformation, as everybody was describing, Ari, you were describing that, it just allows you to be that person you always wanted to be, but you just couldn't, always the barriers in the way, right? So, truly amazing. Thank you.
I just wanted to add too, I love that in the video, Jeremy says, you got to get a foothold in the adult world. I think that was just a really, really important point, because when we were, teenagers, obviously, our parents weren't able to answer any of the questions. And of course, you're not going to go to them, or, even if you did go to them, it's not like you were going to get a straight answer, because they obviously didn't know. But now that we have the information, now we can get a foothold in the adult world, and us adults who are getting this now we can pass it on and teach our children who are going through it too. So it's just, and I also love how Jeremy says, it is a slow process, but it's a fast finish. And you can totally see how that's true. You can see how, this is, for the 50 founding members, or for Jeremy and, getting the 50 founding members to really see this, and for the 50 founding members to really work so hard to sort of get the information up and everything like that. So I suppose that was a slow, hard process, but now the more and more people are coming on board and getting the information, and we've got the global waivers, and we've got the Facebook group, and it's growing. You can see how this is going to be a fast finish, and just everyone's going to get on board, and you can just see it happening. It's pretty amazing to be a part of.
Absolutely, Ange. I mean, the world just keeps getting worse, and it's that there is only one. Jeremy just keeps saying this is, and it's so true. And the more you get into this, the more you'll see this is the only, island of sanity in a world of madness. And you can go, everywhere you like, and look at every single thing. Nothing solves anything like solving the human condition solves everything. And the beauty of this is it's 100% turnaround. It's not just a little bit good. It's not just a bit of a fix. It absolutely transports whoever, whose ever life is transformed, it absolutely transports you to a new place on earth and a new place in yourself. I mean, I know, when Ari talks about a war within himself for 50 years, I resonate with that. You wake up, and it's all in hindsight. I know it was, when I went through it, it was terrible. You know, when you're a little boy and you just can't work things out, and you burst into tears for no reason. And, you know, as a teenager, like, God, I remember it was 2.5 years and just lying in my bed at boarding school, just going, why? You know, and you have no idea even what the question is half the time. It just feels awful. And, you know, and I can literally remember the day when you just, it's like 1 minute, you know, you're a child and you're not, you know, you're bouncing around a playground and relatively sort of, you know, well, we haven't sort of really gone into the deep and dark recesses of the human condition. But when you hit 12, I just remember the day. It's literally, you know, second term, year 7, I started, and it just got hell on earth trying to work it out. What is going on? And nobody talks to you and nobody can tell you anything. And I just remember when I was, you know, in year 10, finally, just a bloke turned up and he was a bit more advanced than me. He showed me what it was like to be resigned. He had a photo album full of, you know, going to parties and having fun. And finally I that's what you do. Okay, I'll go and do that. I'm going to just play footy. I'm just going to find girls and distract myself. But it's underneath, it's horror. And in hindsight, you're looking, all that you're doing under the duress of the human condition is just navel gazing the whole time, just looking for a win. You're out there, all you're concerned about is people giving you some reinforcement and finding some new win or holding up that facade, because the moment you drop that facade, you know, you're back to that absolutely horrifying feeling that you might be an awful person, and that's the war, you know. You know, you stop for a minute, you might reflect, you sit and you look out on a beautiful sunset, and then it starts coming up, so you got to go and get busy, and then you got to drive yourself to do stuff, and then get a win, and then you driving yourself, you push too hard and it's dysfunctional, and then you brakes, and so you feel even worse. And, you know, the whole thing is just diabolical, the human condition. And it's just an absurd situation that we all have to live with. But that's the beauty. It's been sorted out. And you can just, like, meeting Jeremy Griffith was just an amazing situation. It was finally someone, it doesn't matter what, you know how in the world, what you do is you just sort of walk around complaining about things, you know, oh, this isn't quite good, and that person's a bit off, and they didn't treat me right, and I didn't do this, and, you know, I didn't get a win because of that reason. But all of a sudden, you meet Jeremy Griffith, and he just says to every single one of those, every point, it's so annoying because he doesn't agree with you. He just solves them all for you one by one. It's like, no, that's actually not a problem, because this is actually what's going on, and this is how it's solved. And that's, you know, you can finally understand that situation. You sort of, at the start, you're going, no, I just want you to agree with me to say that it's been really difficult for me, you know. But it doesn't work like that. And you start, over time, you start to get used to, hang on a minute, everything is solvable here. There isn't a problem on earth, and from the smallest to the largest that is not solvable, all of a sudden it's just, you know, take whatever you want. Here, I'll throw men and women at you, you know, racism, all the, you know, and Jeremy just sort of, you know, strolls through it. Here's old Adam, and off he went, and he got corrupted and alienated and angry. And so, of course, that's what's going to happen. You know, and it's just amazing to be part of that. And I just got to tell you this because it was really special to me. It has been my whole time. But seeing Annie, so you can see, you see Jeremy, he's like explaining everything to me when I met him, and he's just, you can watch, like I was saying, you know, just solving everything. And I still hadn't quite got it. I was going, what? But what do you mean, Jeremy? Like. How do I behave? What's the difference? How do you transform yourself? What am I doing? do I just try harder to be nicer, or to not be as alienated, or stop doing what I'm doing? But it's all of a sudden you see Annie, and she's just in the background, and she's just the most. She knows this solves every problem, and she's gone from this situation where she's like, you can see she's a messed up human like me, but she's gone from a selfish existence to a totally selfless existence. And it just honestly dropped just absolutely changed my world, because all of a sudden you can, I'm getting all the answers and I understand the answers, but I didn't know what to do. But all of a sudden, this is a change. Stop everything you're doing. All of the madness, all of the craziness, all of the mess, all of the stuff that you've been talking about and doing and going around in your life and feeling bad about and navel gazing, and it's just crazy, mad rubbish. And I just saw this woman, and she just didn't care about anything, not one thing except saving the world. And I thought, yeah, you're messed up. I get that, and I can see that you're good. I can sort of understand that applies to me. But I can see, hang on a minute, that's how it's going to work. Everybody stops everything they're doing, everything. But, you don't need cars and material like Mercedes or your Land Cruiser and your side skirts to make yourself look good, and your mag wheels or whatever it is that your particular thing that makes you. Just all of that stuff is totally meaningless, absolutely rubbish. Yes, it's had its day, it's been important. Materialism's been our one great rock of looking after ourselves and making us feel good while we had to go through the horror. But it can all stop now. And it's the same with everything. If you want to clean up climate change or whatever the problem is not, we can, go and enforce it. You don't need to enforce it. When you let go of the human condition, when you don't need to prove your worth, when you don't need to, all this greed and rubbish that we need to fill ourselves up, in materialism and make us feel good about pretending that we're loving the environment or whatever. People are just genuinely selfless. They give up all that rubbish. That's how the world's going to change. People are going to go from 100% selfish to 100% selfless, And it's not a dogmatic thing. You're not having to force yourself. You just want to do it. And that's the thing. That's what the other unbelievable thing is, that we are built selfless. Like in our genes, in our instincts, we know it. We know it so well, and we just love it. And we want love. And we just desperately know the whole world is built on love and integration. And it's just an amazing thing to be able to be part of that. Find that meaning and finally know what you're doing and fitting into the world without being a blight on it. Anyway, sorry, someone else better say something.
Great call to arms, Tony.
Yeah.
That was awesome, Tane. I really, really, really agree with that, mate. And I sort of don't know where to go with that. I had a few other thoughts. I mean, the main thing for me was just sort of thinking back to your introduction, and that really struck me in terms of just the responsibility we've got now that, we understand that the human condition has been solved. And you just had that off the back of making that realisation that you can free yourself and you can free the world for exactly the reasons you are talking about. And for me, I think in the course of that interview, Brian Carlton makes reference to the statement by Professor Harry Praisen about freedom being the book that saves the world. And for me, that interview, if you're someone who's newer to the information, it provides a compelling argument, a line of logic, a demonstration in terms of actually seriously contemplating, well, maybe that's a bold claim, it's a big claim, the book that saves the world. But as I say, if you were someone newer, in my view, it actually provides taking that possibility seriously. And if you're someone who's been around the information longer, then it goes beyond that in terms of just confirming what you perhaps yourself have already experienced and you know to be true. Like you've actually you've digested the information and you've had those aha moments where it's not like someone just providing knowledge to you. It's someone providing knowledge and information to you, and both sort of intuitively and intellectually being able to know that's the truth, that is actually it's making sense of who you are, making sense of the world. And I just think, it obviously it covers so much ground. Some of it's been touched on in terms of I thought there was really good comments from Brian Carlton that just provide, like I say, that demonstration or confirmation of elements that Jeremy talks about in terms of, he obviously, talks about his own experience of resignation. And obviously there's this, it's funny, we're here talking about resignation and it's probably been touched on, but there's this, for me, it's mind-bending that, and I think Jeremy obviously makes this point, is that resignation is the most fundamental thing that happens in your life to every human, and yet we don't even talk about it. It's like it's a word that Jeremy's actually derived to capture the psychological thing that happens in our life that dictates all our behaviour. And I have to sort of take stock of that and think, wow, we just don't. No one talks about it, and there's a really good reason for that. That we can understand the reason for that, but it is, for me, it is still mind bending, and it just links in with that thing that Annie touched on, and Jeremy, I think he uses the term. It's just an anchor point in terms of like it's an access point to being able to get a footing and a grasp on opening this door. What is the human condition? I mean, Jeremy describes how variously people can recall, like you were talking about, Tone, that the duress of middle adolescence and that sense of just bereft and distressed and asking why like you are, but not knowing what you're asking why about. And there's that unbelievable quote from Coles with that, I just love that there's a term in there that's used that I think Coles uses it, talking sort of self-judgment. And that for me just captures it, that, that's what's going on in your deeper self is you just keep arriving at this suicidal, unthinkable self-judgment. And that's what and it's just everything that Jeremy says, you are looking at, and I have to take this seriously because post-resignation, and I don't really recall my own resignation, I sort of think that, look, I am objective. I can look at the world rationally. You're not aware of your denial. You're not aware of just this massive brick wall through your brain that's preventing you actually seeing the world straight. And but if Jeremy articulates, well, what if at pre-resignation you are seeing the world honestly? Like, what if you've got an uninhibited view of what the world, of the contradiction, not only in the world, but in yourself, and you're just there day on day, constantly lining that up. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just such a, even for me who got no recollection of the distress at that time, I can still bring myself to sort of have a sense of what that must have felt like. If I really take seriously, Lana, you were looking at the world honestly then. You weren't in denial. You were looking for an understanding to try and reconcile and not arrive at this conclusion that you are a blight on the planet. And I just like Brian Carlton talked about, that concept of denial and the death effect. And again, it's just so good to have someone, if you like, a third party, because Jeremy talks about the death effect and why that happens, and there's a really good reason for it. But people can look at that and think, oh, that's sort of like, it seems like a bit of an abstract concept, but Brian Carlton makes the point that, and just affirms that no. If you've got an underlying fear about a subject matter, then people are going to, I think he used the word, eyes are going to glaze over. There's going to be resistance. There's going to be denial. And it's so helpful to just have in the mix in that conversation, because then again, if you're newer to the information, you can take that into consideration as you're processing and you're reading freedom. And also when you're talking to your friends and your colleagues and what have you, family members, you can have that same understanding. Well, maybe what's actually going on here, if there is they're struggling with or whatever, maybe this is the deaf effect at work. And there's no criticism in that. There's no judgment in that. There's understanding of, well, you can relate to it in yourself, so you know why that's going to happen in other people. And just something I quickly also just wanted to chat about, like I touched on there, I've got that concept of knowing at resignation that I don't recall it, but what I do know is Jeremy just makes the point out, you shut, at least for the vast majority of us, we do shut that door. And I just wanted to sort of verbalise from my perspective that I know that in terms of, it was about taking up a superficial existence, and it was over an adjustment period into my sort of up to my early 20s, where you do adopt a false frame of reference for life, that the meaning of life is to be competitive, and you basically buy into a delusion that, achieving power, fame, fortune and glory, that success actually is real evidence of why you're worthwhile. Like you become you're sort of inside that. That's your worldview, that competition, winning in that, that's evidence, that's real evidence of why I am, why I'm worthwhile. And again, there's a very good reason for that. And that's what we're able to obviously make sense of now. And I think lastly, from my perspective this sort of links a little bit with what you were talking about, Tone, and also Ari, was that just that that whole paradigm is based on a false pretense, and that's all been necessary and completely understandable. It's been heroic, but it is now transparent. And it links with something Ange said about why we come home fast now on this journey, and Jeremy talks about in the interview, where sort of once you realise this, you experience the truth of this information, it makes the world transparent. So yeah, you have this strategy going, but you sort of can't unknow what you know. And yes, you still got habituations and commitments to it, but fundamentally, the whistle's been blown, if you like, or put it another way, it's wrapped up in that resignation that's dependent on adults remaining silent and keeping the secret of what the human condition's about. And for me, that's what freedom does. It ends the silence. It breaks the secret on this denial of the human condition. That's going to stop us all, the vast majority of us, going over that cliff that Holden Caulfield talks about in Catcher in the Rye. And just the point being is that transparency, it works its effect on you, where even in my own case, there's a tremendous commitment to just keep pursuing that power, fame and fortune, and being failure trapped, like Jeremy describes in that talk. But on the other hand, you've got the power of this logic, and it's working away. It's making that means of supporting yourself transparent, redundant, obsolete, and you become aware of that, and it takes you in, and you become more and more aware of, everything like Tone was talking about at the start of this talk, just how deep the human condition is, and that, there might be sort of differences between us, but fundamentally there is this baseline upset. It is a 2 million year journey. There is this baseline upset from the human condition, and we've got this capacity. We're not only just owning what we know in ourselves, but we've this information allows us to own what we're capable of as a species, and that is horrific. Mm. But this information that's all fundamentally in us, in essence. And, that's that concept Tone talked about of it being redeeming. We can look at all of that, not just die in shame. And it's that thing where, we are saying here, look, I can feel it in myself. Look, is that what you're really talking about? Are you wanting me to really put on the table who I am? And there's this immense fear that is. If I put that on the table, I'm not going to be able to cope, and you're going to run a mile. But that's what changes now because of the this understanding and the compassion that flows from that. Anyway, I just wanted to, and that for me is why we come home quickly, because of that transparency that works. And what Tone said, underneath, notwithstanding this commitment and this craziness we've got, there's also this other part of ourselves that just yearns to stop that. And that's Ari walking past the playground and seeing those children, and in myself, I can look at my capacity to hurt the one I love. I can look at young blokes, young boys, if you like, going into adolescence and putting on their armour and becoming fake and superficial, and their real selves dying inside themselves. And so that the momentum that to shift onto the side of supporting this truth is going to win out. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And anyway, I think there's just a few comments from me that in terms of why I found it I haven't listened to it for a while, and it's just such a instructive talk, and it really, really aligning, and just so many elements that confirm, that cold stuff, confirming, resignation is not something Jeremy's made up. All the elements, the fundamentals of that are embedded in that Coles interchange with that young boy. So, awesome introduction, Tone, and loved hearing from everybody else.
I just really quickly wanted to respond to what Tone said, because that's why this resignation discussion, I'm so passionate about it, and it means so much to me, because I had all the Adam Stork story. I've been so fortunate to work closely with Jeremy all these years. I had all the brain food to work it out, but I couldn't. I was stuck in the Mexican standoff, and I'm in the Mexican standoff because I couldn't cope with the confrontation. I couldn't cope with the truth about my immense upset inside. And that's not just a baseline, that's me. I'm deeply, deeply insecure. I've given up on the ideals, and that's why resignation's so precious, because it explained to me why I couldn't think, why I couldn't be selfless, why I'm so dedicated to such a superficial way of thinking, and dedicated to getting reinforcement artificially, completely artificial, superficial, weird, alienated existence. That's me. And I felt so condemned about that without the explanation of resignation. And when I got the explanation of resignation, it was like the best gift ever. I remember the heaviness just going away, because at last I could stand beside the truth. Like I said, I wasn't condemned. And then you can see Jeremy's outside of this matrix of denial, and that's how he can find the truth. I mean, the clarity and the innocence in that video, it's just stunning. He's a different species. His brain's alive. He's so full of soul. And here I am standing in his presence, and I'm so dead in soul, and I'm so shriveled up and crippled and groping in the dark. I can't see a thing. To live at that interface is incredibly condemning and criticising unless you've got the full understanding of the human condition up. And that's what I got with resignation. And he's not even resigned, and he worked it out. I mean, that's an example of how brilliant his mind is and how clear it is. And the word upset, resignation, they're perfect descriptions. There's not an ounce of criticism in there. They're all compassionate, all understood. And that's what makes the ability to be selfless, if you like, legitimate, because we have to be honest about how messed up we are. Because just saying we've got moral instincts and we can smile again and be loving again, it's rubbish. I can't be legitimately selfless or loving. I'm dead inside. But how I can live is through the legitimacy and truth and explanation of this understanding. And that brings a genuine selflessness to me and the world, and that vision of, as everyone's spoken to, living for the children that don't have to resign, and living for the prophets to come, and being part of that is just the most incredible gift that the world's ever been given. And so I just wanted to be honest about that, because it's not about me being selfless. It's about incredible fortune I've had to run into this information and have so much experience with Jeremy's mind. And I love that mind so much. When you understand resignation, your appreciation of an unresigned mind just deepens and deepens and deepens. And I'm on my knees to it. And Bill mentioned briefly, that people, and Jeremy mentioned in the interview, ships at sea who leave the door open. But ships at sea are as messed up as resigned people, because they're not sound enough to live in the presence of the ideals. Yes, they're incredibly brave and courageous, and they've hung on to the ideals where I just went, I can't cope, I'm out of here. I resigned to not living ideally. But so they're at that interface still, which is incredibly heroic. But read the resignation essay. It explains that that's an incredibly turbulent life that causes enormous psychological upset too. So we're all messed up. Jeremy nails it when he said, it's resignation is alienated sanity versus a ship at sea is honest madness. What we needed was an unresigned mind that was sound enough to stand in the face of the ideals and never let go and fight and fight and fight to save this world. And that's what we've got in Jeremy Griffith. And you can stand beside this book and have all of that too. You can stand up and be honest about the human condition in yourself, and you can stand up and be honest about how we solve it. Anyway, just wanted to add that clarification to what time Kelly said.
Well, that was absolutely drop dead brilliant, Annie. Oh, it's so good to hear.
We are coming home together.
Yeah.
So thrilling, as everyone said, and just loved everyone speaking, and it was really special to hear all that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. Like, it's just it is. I think Ange said it. The fast finish thing. Like, it's just got to catch on. It's like, and he's saying, look, everybody, we are totally messed up, and it's really confronting. It's honestly, it's really confronting to see yourself, your true self. Jeremy's actually got this bloody picture. I love it. It's probably my favourite picture on earth, because it's me to a T, and it's where he's got this. I don't know how to say it. Actually, it's Basque or some French guy.
French guy, yeah.
Anyway, but it's this monster painting, right, that he's done. It's sold for some extraordinary amount of money, 150 million or something. But in front of it, there's this photo that, just a drawing that Jeremy did, and it's just got this great face on it where he's sort of had this mask in front of this monster. And it's just so me. The mask, I just look at myself, being a hero, and just putting this fake sort of, this is me putting this out to the world, but actually this is me, this monster, this absolutely crazed, awful, or any of Bacon's painting. That's me, and that it is incredibly confronting. Like, it's to see yourself. What's the quote from God, what's his name? Carl Jung. It's one thing to look or something, but anyway, look into the face of absolute evil is the end of it. But and that's you, the face of absolute evil. That when you strip all this, fakeness away and all this charade that you're doing, you, like Annie's saying, you've thrown out ideals, you got rid of everything, and it's bloody hard to look at yourself. But the thing is, that's what Annie's saying. I just love it. You can look at yourself now. You can see that it's defended. It's actually totally heroic. The more messed up you are, the bigger the monster, the bigger the craziness, the more heroic it's been. And, this is not condoning that destruction and that awfulness and despicableness in yourself, that upset, right? It's not condoning it, not one bit. It's just ending it. That's what the transformation is, not living in alignment with your upset state anymore. We don't have to, right? You're just this crazed, massive monster, and you can leave it behind. You can be honest about it. I am totally messed up, and that's the beauty of the transformed state, where you can say, look, yep, we've got to go here. We've got to get all this truth up. We've got to see the monster. It's horrific. I've destroyed everything I've ever touched, pretty well. And yet I just get to put all that down, and I get to go over and live in the most magical, meaningful understanding, Finally, because I just lived my whole life just thinking anything that was idyllic was just bullshit. I just despised it. Fuck off, you bloody wankers, Save the trees, save this. And I'll be like, are you real? That is not how the world works, That was me, cut down trees, whatever. It's just, look. But now I can go and be there, and it is absolutely a magical, integrative, wonderful state. I mean, it's like in those great quotes where you can, and you start to feel what it is like to be, to feel what a tree's feeling or something. I mean, you can imagine it, and you go far out. Yeah, that you can, in the future, everything is going to be totally integrated, and everybody's going to be sort of all knowing about everything. And that's, when a few years ago, that was just madness speak to me, but it's not anymore. There is this unbelievable sort of world that once you lift the veil up, it just opens it up. Anyway, I just, so good to hear you talk, Annie. Thank you for that. And it was so good to hear everyone speak. Has anyone else got anything to say? Sorry, I should...
Just one last thing, Tony. You mentioned Carl Jung, and by firstly Sam and Annie and everybody, you've injected me with enough new world to last about 100 lifetimes, I reckon. It's been amazing. But I love Carl Jung's quote, Tony, wholeness for humans depends on owning our shadow. And it just flows on from what you said, because for me, that's it. I can own my shadow. It's really simple now. Jeremy explains what that shadow is, and I can own it. So there is absolutely no obstacle now for me to be whole and for humanity to become whole. There are no more obstacles other than our own damage and our own selves. And, there's an element of courage. There's a massive amount of courage that, is required on this journey, but humans have that courage. Our courage to depart from our soul was as courageous an act as possible to get us here. So we have the courage, and we're going to find the courage. But, I just love that, to be able to own my own shadow, to look at my life and the madness and the behavior and the tyranny and all that, and to be, a lady wrote on the Facebook community a while ago, I woke up in the morning and I said, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. And she's absolutely right. It's absolutely brilliant. And I do something similar. I can wake up in the morning and I say, I'm upset, I'm explained, I'm defended, I'm lovable, I'm good. And I get on with my day and I support this.
Yeah. And there's a reason chapter 9, which is all about the transformed state, comes after chapter 8, because we have to move on from it. We can be honest about it, but we can't, and responsibly we shouldn't overly study that or overly confront our upset. We don't have to. It's a macro application of the information, and we can move on in ourselves, and that's what moves the world on and stops it. So, yeah, go Ari.
Yeah, go Ari.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I'm so humbled. I'm so humbled to be here, and he's just the most beautiful man on the planet, and just absolutely beautiful, amazing. His entire life dedicated to saving every future human. It's just amazing, and you guys are amazing. I know you hate hearing that, and I want to be invisible and faceless and nameless, and just do what I can behind the scenes to just support this incredible movement.
Yeah. seeing a truly, intact human who is genuinely selfless and, not insecure is a sight to behold. And it's just, far out. It has not been easy for Jeremy to do what he's done. It's been like Plato said, they basically tried to kill him, tried to stop him, to raise this unconfrontable, well, to everybody else who isn't secure, it's unconfrontable, but to Jeremy it's not. And he's just been so, he's just known the truth and stuck to it, and he's alive inside like we're not. And like Annie was saying, that the difference between those two is just, it's black and white. It's just
like a different species.
Yeah, it is. And just, I've been so unbelievably lucky to be able to just see how Jeremy behaves. Just because it's, it's see someone who's real when you're not, and you're not. He's just a very real, and he, he's just genuinely, unconditionally selfless. He just loves this. Every single thing he does is to stop the suffering, every minute of every day, and he does it harder and stronger and more sensitively and more compassionately than you'll find anywhere. And you're right, Ari, he is just unbelievable. So we're just so lucky, to be on Earth when Jeremy came along and, and he gave us the understanding. And, that's why I just, I can see, it's just, it shows you so much what with understanding, we know that this understanding exists and is real, and what we owe to it and to every human that's come before us that's contributed to, to this point of, creating science and understanding basically the difference between nerves and genes, and then Jeremy, being nurtured enough essentially to be able to solve the human condition. But that we can hear it and we know that it's true, how much how much responsibility that places on our shoulders to, get this to the world, get this to a whole generation, stop the suffering. Only this will. And sorry. But you're right, Ari, it's unbelievably special. Anyway, I'm not sure. I don't have a clock, but
it's been going a long time.
All right. Well, sorry, we've been going over time, but so unless anybody else got some last things to say, go for it. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
No, it's been a great chat.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really special.
Indeed. Yeah.
No worries. Well, thanks very much, everybody, for coming along, and Jeremy is going to be doing these soon, so that's going to be an absolute treat, and I know everybody's looking forward to that. So make sure you can subscribe for the notifications on the website, or you can see these videos on the website on the events page, or just go to the homepage and you'll find them from there. So we look forward to seeing you next time.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
See ya, everybody.